وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المطهرين المكرمين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. قال الله العظيم في كتابه الكريم وهو أحسن القائلين وأصدق الصادقين: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الذين يجتنبون كبائر الإثم والفواحش إلا اللمم. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. For the purification of the souls, the enlightenment of the hearts, for the hastening of the reappearance of the awaited Savior, Ajjallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif, enlighten your souls and the atmosphere with the recitation of salawat upon Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Respected elders, sisters and brothers in Islam, Salamun Alaikum wa Rahmatullahi Ta'ala wa Barakatuh. If anybody today was to be asked about what's their worst nightmare, or what's the worst thing that they should be frightened about, or an aspect of their lives that they dread the most, it will be interesting to hear the responses of the people. You recognize that different people will give different responses. You'll find some will say, my worst nightmare is to be in the state of poverty. Others will say, the worst thing that could happen to me is to fall into illness. A third individual will say that I'll be in a war zone or not necessarily have a freedom. And so different people would come forward and talk about their somehow dreaded situations in their lives. For believers, the worst thing that has to be always protected against, and it is something that we must develop a source of immunity or strength within us, is sins. As individuals, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted us free will and has given us the ability to choose our actions, it is consequences of the sins, it's the detrimental impacts of gunah or dhunub which have to be the most concerning thing for you and I. And it is truly devastating, because when we look at our lives, we often hear and see the situations presented before us in which human beings depart from this world. And when they depart from this world, even if they have done righteous deeds or performed good deeds, if they, God forbid, have been individuals who have been relaxed as far as sinning and the disobedience of Allah is concerned, then they are in real trouble. Some people might say, it's fine, I have done my salah, I've gone to Hajj, I've gone to ziyarah. Yes, I sin a lot. I've heard personally people often talk about this. They say, I'm trying, what can I do? I slip up continuously. It's self-admission of guilt, yes. One of the mu'mineen said once, he passed by first class, area in the plane, or business, yes, business class or first class. He saw one of the brothers that he normally sometimes sees in the, sometimes rare occasions in the mosque, or well known from the Shia community. And that person, mashallah, fairly well off. He said, as soon as I passed by, on his small tray there was a glass of wine. He said, I was surprised, and he was embarrassed that he saw me, or I saw him in this particular state, drinking intoxicant, drinking alcohol. He said, as soon as he said this, he tried to cover it, then he said salam to me. Then he said, I sin a lot. Can you teach me something so that I do good deeds to balance it off? It seems to be in the mindset of people that it's like, this, I have a problem with this weighing scale mentality that many of us have about Day of Qiyamah. Most of the times we're told Mizan, there is a weighing scale. Alhamdulillah, this day and age is digital. Back in the time, it used to be ones where you put, even today in the Middle East or other countries, India, Pakistan, you go and buy some kilo tomatoes, they'll put a kilo in one side and then they'll put the tomatoes on the other, and when it balances, they give it to you, yes? Many of us think that on the Day of Qiyamah, sins and good deeds are like that. I put sins in one side, deeds, the good deeds on one side. If the good deeds are more than the sins, then you are in Jannah. That's what we teach our children. That is not what the Quran or the Ahl al-Bayt have taught. One sin could destroy all of our actions. That is the reality. The Holy Prophet of Islam, Rasul al-A'zam Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. You all know of the same story when he came back from the Mi'raj, by in person, physically, when he said to the people, and then he saw companions, he said, I saw palaces being built every time dhikr of Allah, subhanallah, walhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar, were being recited, and these supplied the malaika with golden bricks for these palaces to be built in Jannah. And so everybody was delighted and happy. But then the Prophet of Islam says, be wary not to send things towards these palaces in which it is destroyed. Which means what? I could do a lot of good deeds, but perhaps one or two sins could be so heavy and detrimental it brings everything down. True? Because there are impacts of these sins that we do not necessarily see. These sins could have impact on my spirituality, on my family, and it could be something that others learn from me and practice till the day of Qiyamah, which the repercussions of it will fall onto me. Now, why did I choose this subject on a night like this, as we come to celebrate auspicious occasions as well as the beginning of a month which is part of a 3-month course for the believers in order to strengthen themselves against sins? Because by the might and the power and the compassion and the kindness and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows the worst thing for us is sins. And shaitan, that's their number one target, isn't it? Shaitan, what do they want from us? That's all they want. Once we start sinning, they're happy. Nothing else. So Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala continuously throughout the year provides us with opportunities, with chances. He, out of His mercy, says, I'm not going to abandon you. I'm going to give you so much chance for you to be able to strengthen yourself against sins and to maybe ask forgiveness from the sins. And this is how it is demonstrated to us, especially when it comes to the holy month of Rajab. Because narration after narration tells us one of the greatest deeds in the month of Rajab, this is the beginning of the 3 months of spirituality. And we are told on the first eve of the month of Rajab, the eve of the first night, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends an angel by the name of Da'i. This is in narrations of the Ahl al-Bayt. This angel by the name of Da'i calls out. He says, this is the beginning of the month of Rajab. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive those who seek the forgiveness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide those who seek the guidance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless those who seek the blessings. And so you recognize the month of Rajab, Sha'ban and Ramadan are a tremendous assault course and a powerful boost, like a fuel that we need in order to be able to resist and to cleanse ourselves. And on this particular occasion, as we are celebrating 2 special anniversary of Wiladats, the Wiladat of the 5th Holy Imam, Imam Muhammad al-Bakr, as well as the 9th Holy Imam, Imam Muhammad al-Jawad al-Taqi, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhima. Like to tackle this subject by answering 3 questions which have been commonly asked by people with regards to this subject, this area of sins. Number 1, does it matter if it's a small or a big sin, and how can it alternate and change? Number 2, why do we sin? What's the psychology? What leads us towards disobedience of Allah? And number 3, what practical tips can I take with me tonight? 20, I will mention, due to the barakah of this night or these nights coming up, 20 practical tips on standing strong against sinning, especially as we come to a conducive environment. When I say conducive environment, what do I mean? I mean the month of Rajab, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala softens our hearts. The month of Sha'ban, Allah softens our hearts. The month of Ramadan, Allah softens our heart. In Ashura, Allah softens our hearts. When we go to Hajj, Allah softens our hearts. Yes? Softens the hearts means what? It means you are in an area where there is a stronger Wi-Fi connection. Meaning what? Meaning sometimes when you want to connect to the internet or your signal is low, you struggle. But some other areas, no, there is a more powerful signal, yes? Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala says, if you want to, I will enable you to take these steps towards me in these holy months. So therefore, it's an opportunity not to be neglected. It's an opportunity to latch on. And here, I have 2 narrations. One the 5th Imam, one from the 9th Imam, as we're celebrating their births on this subject. The first is from the 5th Imam, who says, Mawtul insani bidhunubi aktharu min mawtihi bil ajal. Allahu Akbar. This is phenomenal. The 5th Imam says, people dying due to their sins is more in number than those dying because of their allocated ajal time. How many of us think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me a set time that I will die by? For example, person X must die by the age of 75 years. Fifth Imam says, it is to have al-uqul, he says, no, more people die as a consequence of their sins than those who reach that level that Allah has given them. More. And then he says, وَحَيَاتُهُ بِالْبِرِّ أَكْثَرُ مِنْ حَيَاتِهِ بِالْعُمْرِ. The people who live more because of their good deeds than because of their set time. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that they will perform good deeds. Therefore He has set their time up. Yes. What is very interesting is that most of the times when we talk about the subject of sins, and I know it's a subject which is gloomy, but many people are wary of it, and we have spoken a lot about it, but what it gives the first impression is Qiyamah. Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala is warning us, it's here first. There are severe repercussions of collecting sins as we go along in our lives, namely lack of rizq, namely all the troubles and hardships and difficulties that we may face. Example of ulama, for example, say that have you been in instances where you have forgotten something? Keys inside the house and you've left the house, for example. Or you can't remember at all a password to something which is absolutely key and you don't have any way of getting that password, or it's very, very difficult. Have you been in those instances where you think, what's going on? My memory has gone zero. This is most likely a repercussion of a sin. This is most likely something you and I have done, and it's a result of it. Yes, most likely. Now, the ninth holy Imam, he comes forward and says, وَاسْتَرْجِعَ الذُّنُوبِ بِشِدَّةِ النَّدَمِ. He says, ask Allah to go back and have the ability to what? To somehow refund or give back the sins. Yes, by having a great sense of remorse. A great sense of what? A feeling of disappointment with oneself. Yes. Imam says, وَكَثْرَةُ الْإِسْتِغْفَارِ, and continuous seeking of istighfar. Now, one of the greatest deeds in the month of Rajab is istighfar. And another three things are mentioned for the month of Rajab: fasting, istighfar, and giving sadaqah. These are the best deeds in the month of Rajab. Yes. Highly recommended. Now, when we come to answer these questions, let's answer them very quickly. The first one is, what is the distinguishing factor between what? Between minor sins and major sins. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, الَّذِينَ يَجْتَنِبُونَ كَبَائِرَ الْإِثْمِ وَالْفَوَاحِشِ. The people who are righteous are the ones who stay away from the great sins. إِلَّا الْلَمَمِ. In Arabic, lamam means something which is minor, something which is small. Many ulama have come forward and said in Islamic ethics, in akhlaq, as well as spirituality, they said that when it comes to gunas and sins, they divide it into two categories, minor and major. That's why you have the famous book, The Greater Sins by Ayatollah Shaheed Dastaghi. Very, very well read and widely available in English and other languages online, yes? Where he discusses the greater sins. Now the question arises, what is the difference between minor and major? Ulama come forward and said, the way we can understand the Quran is what? Is that the major sins directly result in, must be punished in Jahannam if there is no tawbah. So an individual who performs it has to taste hell in accordance with the Quran, except by the mercy of Allah, or they ask for tawbah or forgiveness. That's it. However, minor sins may not necessarily be the case. Yes, minor sins, it is counted, it is something that they be held accountable, but perhaps persistence on it or a number of it might result in certain punishments. Or maybe minor sins results in some devastating consequences in this world, for example, or less risk, or the impacts that are described within the hadith literature. Now, what is interesting is, what do we find examples of major sins in the Quran? We find, for example, what? Adultery, zina is considered. Uquq al-walidain, disrespect to parents. Not performing salah deliberately. Drinking of alcohol, for example. And intoxicants, or example, shirk, are all considered major sins. Minor sins sins, these minor, I don't want people to have this idea that just because they're minor, then I am more able to perform them, or I should be necessarily doing them. No. As we said, they develop within the human being that unfortunate tendency to take matters lightly. This is where the problem lies. When we have these discussions about minor and major, often people take these instructions and believe that the minor sins can be what can be performed, whereas in reality it increases the audacity. That's why Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi comes forward and says what? He says, don't keep thinking whether a sin is minor or major. Think whom you are disobeying. You are disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it's minor or major, yes? Ultimately, it's an act of disobedience. It's a sin, without a shadow of a doubt. Now, what is interesting therefore is that sometimes minor sins turn into major. Sometimes they develop into major. Let's look at situations in which this particular thing happens. Number one is when we continue and perform it without asking forgiveness, without having that sense of remorse and guilt. A minor sin, such as, for example, looking at something which is haram, not responding to salam when someone says salam to us deliberately. For example, leaving the mosque at the time of adhan for a wajib salah without an excuse, a valid excuse. That is also a minor sin. Examples are plentiful, yes. If I persist on this and that it becomes a habit and I develop it, then it becomes a major sin. Number one. Number two, when I take it lightly, when committing this act becomes easy, I am not worried, I don't feel a sense of remorse or guilt, and I don't feel a huge burden. That's why the narrations of the Ahlul Bayt says, a sin for a disbeliever or a continuous sinner is like a fly that sits on the nose and they push it away. But for a believer, it's like a huge rock that's landed on their chest. It suffocates them. Think about it. Next time, and we all unfortunately fall into error and sin, yes? But how is our reaction when we do it? That is key. Because Shaitan would come to us and say, that's it, you've sinned, don't worry. Next time, don't do it. And makes us forget the aftermath of our deeds. The aftermath is also critical, yes? That feeling that, I have committed something wrong, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends us alarm bells when that actually happens. Then, to be pleased with the sin. The third thing is to be happy with it, to be delighted that one performed it. Sadly, you see sometimes people doing things, and when you warn them, just because of their ego, just because of sometimes cultural tendencies or whatever, they're indifferent to it, or at least they're happy because they feel that they need to do it to, for example, demonstrate their strength, or for example, to take vengeance. Unfortunately, being happy with sin is tantamount to acceptance of it, and that could be disastrous. Now, what is interesting is ulama say expression of the sin publicly can lead to it becoming major. Meaning what? Meaning that this committing of an act between me and Allah should not be disclosed to other human beings. Unless I am seeking assistance and help. Unless I am desperate for some kind of way out. But I should not be divulging the secret between me and Allah. Why? Because Allah has protected me. Allah is Sattarul Uyub. On the day of Qiyamah is different, is 180 degrees different. Why? Because on the day of Qiyamah, Allah exposes all sins. In this world, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, out of His mercy, imagine if there was a mechanism like today technology where you see someone and you press a button and then all their report comes out, like their medical records with the GP, all the sins they've committed in the past, and I don't think we'll have any friends left. Because you'll be able to see all that they've done and how they've thought about you and what they've said about you and said about others and what they've looked and what they've done. How amazing is the blessing and the mercy of Allah that He's protected us all. Sattarul Uyub. In Dua Abu Hamza, yes? Now, very importantly is how you and I look at the sins of others. We are told if we spread the misdoings and the shortcomings and the wrongdoings of others in the sense that it was protected and we make others know about it, this increases what? That sin becoming a major one for us. Meaning what? Sometimes we have this tendency to want to tell the whole world that we saw someone committing an act of disobedience of Allah. It is not our business unless there is dhulm and I am asking for justice. Unless I am going to go and solve it. But me divulging it to the rest of the world must not take place. Now, what is interesting is there are people in public whose sins are viewed greater in Allah than the people who are in private or ordinary people. For example, the hadith of the sixth Imam in Al-Kafi, Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. يغفر للجاهل 70 ذنبا قبل أن يغفر للعالم ذنب واحد. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the words of Imam Sadiq that the jahil, the ignorant one, Allah will forgive 70 of their sins before He forgives one sin of an alim. And an alim doesn't mean that they're wearing something on their head. That means the knowledgeable one. Yes. That means the one who has knowledge about a certain act, about a certain deed. Not necessarily knowledge about everything. Yes, there is no human being as such that has knowledge of everything. It's only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yes, who is the creator. Now, when we recognize this, we recognize that there is a need to discuss the psychology. Very briefly, what is the reason why you and I commit sins? Two reasons. Very briefly. Number one, it's known as trigger factors, stimulants. Let me give you a simple example for our youngsters to learn this. This benefited me much in my life. Yes, when I read and understood and pondered over this. These are wonderful opportunities to be able to come midweek and honor the Ahl al-Bayt and listen to words of advice and words which guides us is truly great in the eyes of Allah. One of the things that we have to be careful about is this. You know, sometimes we are not hungry. We are, alhamdulillah, satisfied and we are full. We are sitting somewhere and we smell food. Or somebody brings something in front of us that's very delicious. We are full, but what happens? It opens the appetite for us, doesn't it? You say, okay, you know, this is nice, but if something else was given to you, for example, let's give examples. If someone comes forward and puts mishkaki in front of you, so you love mishkaki and it's there, or a minute before he bought you some cauliflower and you are full. The cauliflower you say, you know, please take it away. This mishkaki, you say, mashallah, I'm not having it every day, let me taste. What is the difference? You are full. The brain has been triggered. There is a stimulant which is pleasurable, a stimulant which is what? Something which you desire, something which you like. A human soul, the body and the soul both work together. Seeking pleasurable means anything that gives you any form of satisfaction, releases hormones that gives you pleasure, yes? So therefore, when I am in situations, when I am in conditions, when I am in states which trigger me, I may sin more than other positions and situations. People, mashallah, who come for ziyarah or go to Hajj and Umrah, some of them with us, they say 2-3 weeks, as soon as they land in Heathrow, astaghfirullah, you know, they put their heads down and what is this? Billboards and this, I've been away from it all this time. It's now a shock. Yes? Now, for example, you look at, people say, you know, these TV serials, for example, that we see, or for example, movies, or for instance, being with certain individuals. What this does is allows what? This extra tendency and audacity to commit that sin. If you were a group of people who are what? Who are very respectful in the sense that they don't mention anyone ill, they don't speak badly about any human being, or they're very, very careful. They speak about things which pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's unlikely that in that gathering you'll have the strength to backbite. But if you're sitting with about 6 or 7 people who already you have dissected the lives of half of the community, and you've spoken about this person and that person, and can you believe this person, you'll be encouraged. That stimulant is there. There is collective encouragement. Similarly, when you are sitting at home, you're alone, yes, and you're reading a book full of texts about certain elements, for example, regarding the day of Qiyamah, you're not immediately going to close this book and then pick up your phone and watch YouTube haram. No. But when you're YouTube and you're watching something, and then there's suggestions and then there's stimulants that are turning towards you, and you start to click from one to another, all of a sudden you know that you're somewhere else watching what you're not supposed to be watching. That's how it works. It's all about what? The carrot. It's all about throwing it and saying, and who does this? Who triggers the stimulants? Shaitan. That's the second thing. Second reason why we sin is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I have created you as the soul with the tendency to sin. Inna an-nafsa la'ammaratun bis-su'. The soul can. Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. People say, why? Why couldn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just create us with a strong, soul that says no to sin? What is the point of Jannah and reward then? If Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, makes us all with a soul that doesn't tend towards evil or tend towards wrongdoings, there is no benefit in you and I attaining His pleasure and His mercy on the day of Qiyamah and being rewarded with paradise. True? Therefore, there has to be an examination, and the examination is those trigger stimulants. Be careful who you associate with. Be careful when you're alone or when you are bored, when there is no one watching you, because these are moments of stimulation. Some people say, Maulana, can I go to, for example, these parties? In Christmas, I mentioned in a clip that went viral that you shouldn't go to Christmas parties. I was hugely criticized by many people. They say, Maulana, you don't know. These parties are fine. I'm saying to them, excuse me, with all respect, I know. For many years, I was a pharmacist. I'm very well aware of what happens in these parties. Yes. With all respect to the ulama who come from Qom and Najaf, maybe they haven't been or seen, yes? But I am fully aware of what goes on here. Yes? So when people online, they say to me, you don't know, these parties are innocent. Nothing happens, no gambling, no alcohol, this is all good. Subhanallah, what is it? Wiladat celebration? Of course, this is Christmas parties where there's going to be. Now, even if there isn't gambling or alcohol, there may be an evil look. There may be a bad tendency. There may be a stimulant. Now, if today I was to give you a food or a drink, and I would say to you, there is a chance, a small percentage, that there is something in there that will give you food poisoning. 10%, 5%. I am confident that not a single person here would have that food or drink. Why would you risk 5%, 10%, and then you would want to take that food? No way. You would say, I don't want to have food poisoning. Even if but I tell you, brother, it's fine. It's only 5, 10%. Is there a 5 or 10% to fall in the sin in these particular gatherings or not? Some people say, well, what about these weddings I go to that's mixed and there's music and all this going on, but Maulana is my cousin, this. Don't then come to me and say, Rajab, Sha'ban, Ramadan, I don't feel it. I'm not going closer to Allah. Don't come and say, why am I constantly sinning and I'm asking for istighfar, but I'm feeling very weak in the face of temptations? Because you are strengthening your stimulants and triggers. You are in environments where you are getting all this negative energy, so to speak, energy in the sense of the soul, yes? And then what? You're up against it. You're up against it. So the realization therefore is what? Is that we have to be careful about these triggers and stimulants which make a huge impact. Now, one word about the shaitan. The shaitan has a unique plan, very much individual for each and every human being. For example, if salah is your strength and your strong point, he will pick on your salah. if charity, if coming for ziyarah, if coming for majalis, whatever, that will be his main point of focus. Yes? And other ways, very much tailored towards each and every human being. So it's not about having a common, yes, there are common guidelines in the Quran and in hadith about the evils of the shaitan. The more I know about temptations of the shaitan, many of us will recite A'udhu billahi minash shaitan ar-rajim, but this isti'adha has very, very deep, profound meanings, which one day maybe inshallah ta'ala will go through. But for us suffice to know that we're up against it when it comes to sins, with the shaitan having a tailor-made plan. Now, there are internal stimulants and external stimulants. I'll just list it because time we do not have. Internal stimulants are what? Anger, envy, jealousy, arrogance, miserly. These are internal stimulants. So it's not stimulants only what you see or what you hear. These will trigger, unfortunately, the tendency to sin. If I'm angry all the time, I have an anger management problem, then I may fall into sin more. If, for example, I am suffering with jealousy or envy or hasad from within. I have hatred, whatever I see that someone has that I don't have. Yes, that will ease the way more. Externally, internet, TV, games, certain friends, books and magazines, yes, gatherings of certain individuals, staying away from mosques, from righteous people, from ulama and from holy places. These are all, some people say, brother, I don't go to these bad places, but I also don't go to mosque. Well, here's the news. That's a stimulant. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created our souls in need of nourishment, in need of support, in need of charging. If you stay at home and you don't go to the clubs and the bars, but you don't go to the mosques and imam bargas, then that's a stimulant towards the bars and the clubs, whether you like it or not. Some people say, no, that's 50-50, I'm neutral, I'm in the middle. I don't go to haram, I don't go to halal, I don't like to go. Well, I'm sorry to say that you are on the negative, because the soul needs it. It needs to be charged, at least with knowledge, at least with the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at least in gatherings of the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, manifested through the remembrance of Ahlul Bayt. Very briefly, I'm going to mention 20 points. Time is up, but very briefly, perhaps one day we will expand on these 20 points. How do I become stronger against sins? Number one, must hold oneself accountable continuously. Ahlul Bayt say, whomsoever does not hold themselves accountable is not one of us. لَيْسَ مِنَّا مَنْ لَمْ يُحَاسِبْ نَفْسَهُ. Every night, once a week, once a month, if possible, what did I do? Did I do this right? And it will be interesting to ask family and friends. How many times we've looked at some of our friends and say, you've known me for 10, 15 years. I'll be grateful if you tell me what's wrong with me. Most of us are scared because maybe the friend will take a list, and think it's an attack, personal attack. No, sometimes we've developed habits. So muhasabah, holding oneself accountable, is necessary. Number one. Number two, reflect on the consequences of the sins. So to read more about Jahannam, to read more about the punishments. Some people say, why are you making people despondent? Because number three is to reflect about the goodness of staying away from sins, which means to read more about paradise. Because if today we were not told that if you speed on the motorway 90 miles per hour, you would get possibly 3 points and a penalty, we would not be told this, and most of us would do it. Yes or no? We know the consequences. The more I know the direct consequences of some sins, not just Jahannam and punishment. Yes, most of us are aware of that. But I read more specifically about certain punishments for certain deeds, for certain actions and sins. Yes, and I correlate. Or I just reflect on the verses of the Quran that talk about, for example, the food and the drink of the people of hell. For example. That should act as a deterrent. And then also, I encourage myself by reading more and more about paradise. Getting books, for example, that tell us about Alam al-Barzakh, about paradise and Jannah, and as well as Jahannam. So this is what? Number three. Number four, to visit qabristan, cemeteries, and remind oneself of death. Imagine that is come to you. What would you do? You can't return back. So that is very critical when somebody is about to commit a sin. Because if they know that they're about to die, if someone was to tell you, God forbid, that you have 1 day to live, I can guarantee that one day you'll be so careful. But is there anyone who can guarantee us that there will be one day to live, any one of us here? So that constant position and state of being ready in awareness is critical. Number 5, association of friends. Be careful who you associate with, you hang around, what you say, the environment that you say it. Number 6, don't be in places where you will become weaker. This is different to number 5. Those are the people. This is the position or the location where you will be, yes? Even though you may not be committing haram, it's like passive smoking. There is passive sinning, where the environment rubs off on you. Number 7, it's absolutely critical that we read and we inculcate and we learn about improving our willpower. How to say no to sins, how to say no to desire, how to say no to temptations. Just like how we say no to, for example, sugary food if we're diabetics, or oily food if we're trying to lose weight. I need to be able to say no to sins, and that would require me to strengthen that muscle within, which is known as willpower. Yes. Number 8, to be careful of boredom and spare time. I've mentioned this already. Yes. Number 9, to look for alternatives at times where we are weak and are about to commit sins. So for example, if I want to listen to that haram song, immediately I should look for an alternative which is halal. Yes. I shouldn't just say, oh, I'm not listening to this, because then the urges might pull me towards it. I should always try to look for an alternative which is halal. Yes. Number 10 is to seek more ilm and knowledge, to bestow this protection upon ourselves by knowing more. The more we know, the more likelihood that we'll stay away from any acts which are considered disobedience of Allah. Number 11, desperately, with full, and these are not in terms of priority, by the way. So number 11 doesn't mean it should come number 11, yes. Desperately ask Allah for protection against sins. أَمَّا يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ. How many times when we are told hajat after dua tawassul, or on nights like the eve of the 1st of Rajab, yes. For most people in the United Kingdom will be tomorrow night, yes. And other times of the year, when we asked hajat, how many times we've raised our hands and say, Ya Allah, please help me not to sin. It's a very beautiful, immense dua. Allah wants you not to sin, but to ask Him is even greater. That means you really want it. Number 12, so number 11 is to ask Allah sincerely for protection. Number 12, do not underestimate the sin, any sin, or take it lightly or think that it's small. Number 13, to make, this is very important, to make a nidhr or a vow. Please pay attention, this is a practical thing. Sometimes some of us are chronic sinners, meaning there are sins that we can't say no to. We have developed a habit, yes. So what is it that we are recommended to do? To make a vow before Allah, to say it is incumbent upon me by Allah that if I sin one more time, if I commit this act one more time, I will pay £1,000 to the orphans. Now you might do it, and then you might not pay the 1,000, but it will nag you. It will constantly come and haunt you, because I did this sin and I'm supposed to pay the 1,000. So now it's double trouble. Next time you might do it, but now 3 times trouble, until eventually it becomes too much to bear. This is placing barriers before us and the sins. It's worked in psychology. Yes? They say, for example, if I have a problem watching too much TV, hide the remote control. Yes. So placing a barrier is and one barrier is nidhr or vow, to say if I do this again, I will pay this much, or I'll pray 100 salahs, or I will do something. It has to be halal, yes. Not if I do this, for example, if I lie again, then I will watch this particular Bollywood movie. That doesn't work. It has to be something which is halal, yes. Now, number 14 is, think about when you sin, how those you love will react to it, namely the Ahl al-Bayt. Each and every one of us loves the Ahl al-Bayt, yes. Ahl al-Bayt are presented with our deeds, especially the holy 12th Imam, Sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif. How will the Ahl al-Bayt react when they are given our deeds? Sometimes that feeling of shame puts us in a good position. Yes. 12th Imam will know I've done this. I don't want to do it. Number 15, very important, is connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Dhikr, constant adherence to salah, not taking our ibadah lightly. Number 16 is what? Lying. See, lying is being separated. The 11th Imam says all the evils are in one house and the key to it is lying. Staying away from kadhib is essential, yes. Number 17, to constantly remind ourselves that there is a CCTV monitor 24 hours a day that not only watches our deeds but knows our intentions. أَلَمْ يَعْلَمْ بِأَنَّ اللَّهَ يَرَى. The famous story of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, where he said, someone came to him and says, I want to stop sinning. We don't have time to go through this. And he said, do one of these 5 and you can sin as much as you like. Yes? Eat from that which Allah has not created. Sin as much as you like. Go to somewhere Allah doesn't see you. Sin as much as you like. Go to somewhere Allah is not in charge of. Sin as much as you like. When the angel of death comes and takes your soul, say, no, I don't want to, and sin as much as you like. Or on the day of Qiyamah, when you're taken to Jahannam, say, I don't want to go to Qiyamah, I want to go to Jannah, and change it by your own will. If you can do that, sin as much as you like. These are critical. Number 18 of great importance is what? Is to realize the impact of shaitan, to read about shaitan. And I have a new term which is not copyrighted, anyone can use it. It's called I-Shaitan. I-Shaitan is the shaitan online. Be very careful of the traps of shaitan online. Number 19 is to seek help through specific acts of prayers such as Salatul Layl. As we mentioned it last time, it's very powerful to protect oneself from the falling of sin. And number 20, to do tawbah straight after committing of the sin. Meaning, not to delay istighfar. Not to delay, because some people say, inshallah I'm going to Hajj, inshallah I'm going to visit the shrines of the Imams. There I will ask forgiveness. No, because the more the sins remain in your heart and in your soul, the more negative impact it will have. The narration says that the malaika will be made to forget the sin that soon as it is committed, in the hope that the believer does what? Asks for forgiveness straight after. And that Allah Ta'ala forgives. And so therefore in this holy month, as we are approaching the month of Rajab, as well as the month of Sha'ban and Ramadan, it's a wonderful opportunity and a journey for us to discover ourselves, to strengthen ourselves, to get ready inshaAllah Ta'ala for the journey of Akhirah by protecting ourselves from the most devastating of acts that any human being can do, and that is to disobey Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. We pray to Him Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to give us the strength to be strong and to resist all temptations and to seek istighfar and tawbah all the time. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلي اللهم على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.